I'm going to call to order this regular city council meeting for the city of Troutdale on November 14th, 2023. If you would please join me in standing for the Pledge of Allegiance.
All right.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you very much, everybody. Let's take a roll call, Panda.
Councilor Rittma.
Here.
Councilor Caswell.
Here.
Councilor One.
Present.
Councilor White. Councilor Wittrin.
Present.
Councilor Glantz.
Present.
Mayor Lauer.
Here. We have a phone. Is that Councilor White?
Here.
He's here. All right. Thank you very much. We have a full council. Do we have an agenda update, Mr. Ray Young?
We do not. The agenda should go forward as represented on the agenda.
Okay.
Point of order. Can you guys hear me?
Yep.
Yes.
Council.
Okay, I know Mayor Lauer was not present the last time the first time the dog ordinance came up, but the consensus of the council was to wait a couple months and give the new dog park a chance to open and see how things go before we have this meeting. So I'm asking that agenda item be pulled until like after, sometime in January.
So just for clarification, Councilor White, did you say there was a consensus of the council?
Well, we tried to table it, and there wasn't a second to table it. So Ed helped us out by saying there was another way to do it, and we did everyone agreed except for Councilor One, and of course you weren't there, but everyone else thought that was a good idea. It was mainly to give the new dog park a chance, and also we wanted a different approach to how we were going to handle this dogs in the park situation. And,
That was a meeting that I was running, Randy, and we directed staff to bring it back in a couple months, not in a couple meetings. And so we would appreciate council agreement to pull this agenda item, the one, my tabs don't quite match the agenda, but it's the one about the dogs in parks, until a meeting in January.
Okay, so really quick, do either of you make a motion to pull? It would be agenda item number 6.
Yes, I would make such a motion.
A second.
And a second by Councilor Glantz. Okay. So discussion, Mr. Ed Trumke.
Well, yeah, it was discussed at the last meeting that sometimes the council gives direction back to staff on how to modify, change, or otherwise address an ordinance that is being proposed. And so it was treated on that more informal basis than a formal motion to do something. And it was, my recollection was, is the council wanted to see changes, and some of those, at least some of those, maybe all of those changes are in this proposal. And it was mentioned, I couldn't tell you if it's a majority of council or not, who said we'd like not to see it back for a couple of months. That was mentioned in the direction to staff at the time. Yeah.
Okay, Mr. Ray Young.
And I'll just add that the staff went and took all the input from council, made all the changes that were asked for by council, and in consultation with you, Mr. Mayor, it was decided, well, if we made all the changes requested, there's no reason to wait. Just go ahead and put it on the agenda tonight.
But there was a reason, and that was to see how the off-leash dog park worked. there was no reason to open all the parks to dogs that quickly. That was the reason, and it was, I thought, a very good one.
Okay, so
I'll just
that's
add-
okay. Let me, so Counselor Ritma, so we do have a motion and a second, so we'll honor that and we'll take a vote on whether or not to pull agenda item number 6. What I would offer, what I would ask then, instead of making well, I guess you're not asking to have a certain date for the next time this is brought up. You just want it pulled from tonight.
When it pulled from tonight, the recommendation to staff is to bring it back in January. But that's not part of the motion.
That's not part of the motion. So the only motion is just to pull it from tonight.
Yes.
Okay, I'm fine moving forward with that, with voting on whether or not to pull it for tonight. So the motion is to pull agenda item number 6 with Counselor Ritma and then Counselor White. Further discussion, go ahead. Counselor 1.
If this is treated as a motion to table it, it is not debatable. If it's treated as a motion to postpone indefinitely, which is actually a motion to never bring it back under the council rules, that is debatable. So
Okay,
it's
so-
probably not debatable.
Okay, so we need to, okay, so we just need to vote on to table to the first meeting in January is what
And
Counselor Ritma
that's
stated.
a motion to postpone to a date certain, but I heard Councilor Ritma say the date wasn't part of it, because that would be debatable.
I'm willing to amend the motion to say, I move to table to a meeting in January. If the first one is not full, we'll do it on that one. Otherwise, the second one in January.
Does that suffice?
That suffices, and that makes it debatable, so.
Okay,
Well, no, it's a motion to table.
But, yeah, well, it's, technically, it's a, okay, if it's a motion to table, typically doesn't have a date to bring it back, but, yeah, a motion to table is not debatable.
okay. Okay,
Ray, I have one question regarding the motion. I thought we already voted on it in October at the October meeting, but when we did the consensus of council at that time. So to me, it wouldn't be allowed to be brought back sooner than that 2-month time frame anyway. That's my question.
Yeah, again, that wasn't part of the motion back then. There was no date. It was a desire not to want to see it from Council President Ritma, not to see it for a couple of months. Was the desire, it wasn't part of the motion. It was simply a motion to table.
And no, it wasn't even a motion, it was.
No, it wasn't
Yeah.
a motion at all.
No, it was just more than a majority
a-
of council. It wasn't consensus, which could be defined as all of them, because I know Councilor 1 wasn't in agreement, but it was clear, as we all like to say, I can count that at least 4 councilors did not want to hear it that night. I think that's right. It wasn't an official vote. It was pretty clear that 4 said, we don't want to hear it tonight. Let's wait a couple months.
Right, it was a direction
Yeah.
to staff.
It was 5 counselors, not 4.
okay. Regardless, we have a motion and a second. So.
Okay. Good enough. I wanted clarification is all.
Yep. Okay, Kenda?
Counselor 1,
No.
Mayor Lauer,
No.
Counselor White,
Yes.
Counselor Wittrin,
No.
Counselor Glantz,
Yes.
Counselor Ritma,
Yes.
Counselor Caswell,
No.
4-3 pass.
Okay,
Or did not
it
pass.
failed.
It
So
failed.
we will continue with agenda item number 6 as written. Okay, thank you, everybody. We're going to move on to agenda item number 2. Public comment on non-agenda and consent agenda items is welcome at this time. Public comment on agenda items will be taken at the time the item is considered. Public comment should be directed to the presiding officer and limited to matters of community interest or related to matters which may or could come before council. Each speaker shall be limited to 5 minutes for each agenda item unless a different amount of time is allowed by the presiding officer with consent of the council. The council and mayor should avoid immediate or protracted responses to citizen comments. Let's go ahead and go to Zoom, since all I have are staff members in chambers tonight. So on Zoom, if you wish to make a public comment, now's the time. Go ahead and unmute yourself, state your name and city of residence for the record. All right, not seeing anybody, I'll go ahead and close public comment. We're going to move on to consent agenda item number 3, agenda item number 3, consent agenda 3.1 minutes, October 11th, 2023, regular meeting, and October 24, 2023, regular meeting.
Mr. Mayor, it's really, that meeting was on the October 10th, not the 11th.
Oh, thank you.
And that's the way it's reflected in the packet.
Thank you. I have the agenda sheet.
And with that change, I'll move adoption.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Seconded by Counselor English. All right, all in favor of approving the consent agenda signify by saying aye.
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 All opposed? All right, thank you very much. Agenda item number 4, a discussion on filling council vacancies. Mr. Paul Wilcox, resident of Troutdale, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Mayor. I'm live in person here, almost. I have a few preliminary comments before we get to the body of my packet material. I'm not going to read all the packet material. That was a lot of background stuff for you guys to digest. Anyway, was unmuted but didn't have my mic on. Let's start over. So normally prefer, can everyone hear me for starters?
Yes.
Okay, good. That's what I was hoping for. Would normally prefer to comment in person, but it seems that half the council is most recently on Zoom anyway. However, my main reason to be on Zoom is that I've noticed the audio quality coming from the testimony table can be quite poor, so I think it will be easier to hear me from the home studio. I also wanted to mention that I've been working on getting CAC to address the issue of filling councilor vacancies. I sent them a public comment in February with a follow-up in April. We met in April and they seemed somewhat interested, but had a question about the cost of a special election, which I have since provided. I sent another follow-up comment in September and we met in October and November. CAC has been reluctant to take up the issue fully without council authorization. They've had little subject material this past year, having canceled 4 meetings. I've decided at this point in time, it's too late for them to get involved in a meaningful way. Finally, I want to be clear that raising the issue of councilor appointments is nothing against Councilor Wittrin, although I would have preferred that the February applicants had been November candidates instead. Now to the main issue. I'm not going to read my packet commentary since you've already seen it. However, I think it is worth repeating how and why the current charter came to be in 1994. The year 1993 opened with a pending 4-year vacancy for a council position. In mid-April, the newly elected mayor resigned. Some council members felt those vacancies should be filled by election, but they were told by staff that the existing 1942 charter didn't allow for that. Ultimately, during the period of 1993-94, the city had an appointed mayor and 3 appointed councilors. It was considered problematic enough that the newly appointed mayor called for the formation of a charter review committee comprised wholly of citizens. Very briefly, what I considered the 3 major changes recommended were a 4-year term for mayor, mayoral vacancies to be filled by election, and the July 15th rule, which eliminated 4-year appointments. The first 2 turned out to be very contentious within the council, resulting in a tie vote, which was settled by the mayor casting the deciding vote. One council member felt so strongly that the new charter was not ready for prime time that they submitted an argument against it in the voters pamphlet. Now to the main topic. Bottom line is that I think a majority of voters would agree with me that allowing for a nearly 2-year appointment to council is excessive, nearly as long as an entire Oregon or US House term. To the greatest extent possible, office holders should be endorsed by the voters. Of course, the only way to know that for sure is to put an alternative before the citizens. The major distinction is that 2-year vacancies that occur from a midterm councilor running for and being elected to another office are entirely predictable. The potential for a mood vacancy was also predictable. My main issue has been with 2-year appointments, but there are problems also with the requirement that mayoral vacancies be filled by election only. If Fairview had the same requirement that Troutdale has, they'd have a mayoral election in May 24 and another in November 24. In Troutdale, it might be a year or more before an election came around. In the meantime, the council president would be interim mayor with a 6-member council. And from there, I'll open it up to council, and I particularly interested in Councilor Rittman's recollections of those times, since he was there live in person when all this came about. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you, Paul. We'll just jump into it. Any comments or questions for council regarding Mr. Wilcox's presentation and his agenda and email with agenda minutes from, or council minutes from 91? I guess, Paul, I'll start. What I saw on the end of your presentation, you asked for in summary, and then going through the minutes, I kind of am gathering what you're asking for is basically turn this to voters to, you're asking for support from council. Is that what you're asking for? Start a charter amendment committee to look at putting this on the 2024 ballot?
I'm not asking for a charter review committee, just for the council yourselves to consider some charter amendments that apply to that vacancy section in particular of the charter to address some of the issues I raised. You know, it's not just 2-year councilor appointments. There were some other problems I saw. Just kind of look at that more closely, because I think there were some errors made when it was originally written that weren't actually caught.
There's a section in there where it talks about that the council, the position with an appointment, but you know, your recommendation is in inserting the word remaining in front of council instead of just the council, so it clearly differentiates between, or not giving that outgoing councilor the ability to vote on their replacement. Is that correct?
I'm having a hard time hearing you, Mayor.
Oh, that's because my microphone is off. Sorry about that. I was saying that you're asking, not asking, to clean up the language and adding the word remaining in front of council, where it talks about the council is to appoint the replacement for the vacancy. And there was another section in here where you talked about may be declared vacant as opposed to shall be declared vacant, I believe is what you stated. But so basically you're asking for a charter amendment to make those changes at the very least.
Right. I think another one text-wise would also be the reference to as defined under section 28B at the very bottom, as defined by state law, followed by the 61st day. The problem with that is the filing deadline is also 61 days out. So if you had a vacancy that occurred 62 days out. You'd only have one day to gather candidates. So that, I think that could be eliminated entirely, actually.
Yeah. Counselor Rittma, how do you feel?
Well, yeah, Paul invited my comment on this, but Paul, you have to know that I'm not a fan of changing the charter. I wasn't back in the early 90s. I didn't favor them then. I don't remember if I put an argument in the voters pamphlet, but I certainly was not in favor of it, of the change. What we used to have was mayors served 2-year terms. They were elected every 2 years, and there were 6 councilors, and the mayor only voted in when there was a tie. And it worked for 40 years or something. I can't remember how long, quite a long time that way. And I didn't favor the change then. And Paul, I'm just not going to be able to be much help to you here in favoring any further changes for special elections. I think what happened, while you say, yes, we had an appointed mayor, he had been a councilor, it was Paul Tolliver. He was reelected like 3 more times or maybe 4. He had actually invited me to be mayor, but I was quite new on the council and didn't realize I'd never get another chance. So I've always regretted that, but he was obviously well liked by the people, and I don't think things were so bad. And if we had 3 appointed councilors at the time, it seemed to work. So I'm afraid my recollection of those days are not in favor of further changes to the charter. I wasn't in favor of the last change we just made in the way we elect people, but we'll not get into that. So anyway, I appreciate your inviting me to comment, but I think maybe it's better if I just leave it at what I've already said.
All right. Thank you, Counselor Rittma. Any other comments or questions for Mr. Wilcox from council?
I have a question.
Yeah, Counselor Glantz.
Is this something that we should have the CAC look at? Just to be objective.
I don't disagree with that.
My comment would be, don't refer it to the CAC unless we are in favor of it. The CAC, while they got that busy, according to Paul, and I hadn't realized that, if we refer something to them, it makes it seem like we're endorsing it. I truly think that. And so I don't think we should refer it to the CAC unless we favor it as a council, which you already know where I'm going to come down on that.
I don't know. I think that's what CAC is for.
It is, except well, you don't have to agree with me, but my feeling is that if we refer it to them, it's like we want their endorsement of the idea. And I don't. So.
Well, Counselor One.
Guess I don't. Say what you were going to say.
I was just going to say that I don't not like the idea of sending this to CAC, referring it to CAC. I feel that it is in the purview of the CAC to deliberate and chew on things like this. I don't necessarily see it as a council endorsement, sending it to CAC. And I think if we only send things that we want them to approve, I feel like that's not necessarily using the CAC to what their potential is. Councilor Wittrin?
Can we send it to CAC with the preference of we as council don't know if it needs to be changed or not? We just want you to chew on it. I mean, because we just send it there, I believe, I agree with Councilor Rittma that if we just arbitrarily send it, we are
instinctively asking them to make a change one way or another. But if we say, hey, we don't know if it needs a change or not, but we want you to review it with the overarching goals, then I'm more comfortable sending it that way.
With a white paper saying we don't.
We just don't know, just can you guys take a look?
Counselor One?
I'm just gonna say how I feel about this.
Do
So I guess I don't necessarily think that the way we did it this time was a problem. I don't see it as being a problem in the future of appointing somebody to a position by a group consensus of elected officials. So I feel like people elect us to come up here and represent them in the whole scheme of the thing. And in this case, to expedite a process to get somebody else up here to help with that democratic process. I feel like that's the best way to expedite that process, as opposed to sending it to the voters, having to have a special election, and et cetera. I feel like that's going to draw out this process even longer. And I think in the meantime, for that process, I don't even know how long that would take, but I'm going to say 6 months to 9 months at least minimum. I can just think in my mind, speaking out loud. That's just a longer amount of time of less people up here representing you, Paul, I guess, or anybody else in our city. And I would rather expedite that process. It's 2 years. The next election cycle is going to come up like normal. I don't think people need to be educated extra. There's an extra special election cycle. They're going to be ready to go for that next one. And I just don't see a need to change that. And I don't want to put it especially in a city of our size. I think that we need to move it along as much as we can. I don't want to say that I want to say that I hear what you're saying, and I think in maybe a bigger city, it might be a good idea, maybe, but I can't get behind changing something that I don't think is really broken or happens that often. So.
Okay. Counselor White, do you have any comments?
I was under the impression that it was pitched to the CAC already, and they weren't too interested in it, but I could be wrong. I wasn't at the meeting. And I think they requested, they wanted to know what the rules are regarding what they can or cannot do. And I don't think it was specific to this issue. I think it was more of a general, and I saw in the minutes where Ray offered to go to one of the meetings and explain their rules and role to that group. And I think that's a good idea.
Okay. Counselor Caswell, do you have any comments on this? And then I'll get to your question, Sam, or your comment.
Oh, no, I don't have any comments.
Okay. Counselor Glantz.
Yeah, I was at that CAC meeting, and I don't think that they necessarily thought there should be a change, but it wasn't like it was discussed, because it then triggered into, they didn't think they could even talk about it. So that's where I thought it would be appropriate to say, okay, here you are, talk about it, get us some feedback.
Okay. I'll give my position on it. I don't feel like the system is broken. I feel like it's worked in the, I'm going to say, few instances that it has. And I would agree with Council President Ritma that opening up the charter for a change that's not necessarily a glaring problem, I don't see it as a necessary move or step forward personally. And but I do agree with Sandy that it could seem that getting an impartial position on it could be better. I guess, well, maybe in the future be a beneficiary of this process, but I don't plan on it. So I don't necessarily see it as a problem that we need to dive into more, other than this discussion that we're having right now. And again, Paul, I hear you, and I And I read through your minutes, I read through your topic, and I read through your minutes from 91, and I appreciate the effort that you put into it. Any other comments or questions from council regarding this matter? Any other comments from you, Paul?
I would just close with, from a voter, from my perspective as a voter, well, number one, I think a 2-year appointment is too long. And the other thing is, when you have a midterm counselor running for another office, whether it's mayor or Oregon House, Oregon Senate, Gresham has a midterm counselor running for US House, surprisingly. But my dilemma as a voter is if I vote for that midterm counselor for another office and that candidate wins that office, that opens up that creates a 2-year vacancy, which I don't approve of. So that's my dilemma as a voter. So I just wanted to share that with you guys. And that's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you, Paul. I'm going to open it up. We do have a couple people from the public on Zoom, so I'll open it up to public comment if anybody else has comments on this topic. So if you do have a comment, now's the time. Go ahead and unmute yourself and state your name and city of residence for the record. All right, not seeing anybody. I'll go ahead and, oh, I do have one person in council chambers that snuck in during the discussion. If he would like to make a comment? No? Okay, I'm going to close public comment. All right, thank you, Paul. We really appreciate the discussion and the history lesson. And it was nice to read Councilor Ritma's comments back in '93 and see that they haven't changed. Let's go ahead and move on to agenda item number 5, a public hearing and an ordinance that was first introduced on October 24th of this year, an ordinance adopting text amendments to chapters 3 and 5 of the Troutdale Development Code. Dakota Meyer, back again.
Thank you very much, Mayor. Thank you, Council. I have my very brief presentation that I will share.
Is it just a picture that says nothing has changed since the last time?
That would be easier. Alrighty. So thank you for having me again tonight. Yes, this is the same, nothing has changed, to put it lightly. But I am Dakota Meyer. I'm the Associate Planner here with the City of Troutdale. I'll be presenting the staff report for the proposed text amendment to the Commercial, Industrial Zoning District in the Miscellaneous Use and Standards chapter of the Troutdale Development Code under case file 7514. We first held a public hearing on October 24th, and this is the second hearing for the ordinance adoption. The two primary questions I'd like for the council to consider are: should marijuana facilities as a conditional use in general commercial, light industrial, and general industrial zoned areas now become a not permitted use? And should there be a subchapter reserved in chapter 5 for future psilocybin standards? Here's a zoning map. Again, it's a little hard to see. But the areas in red are the general commercial, areas in light gray are light industrial, and dark gray are general industrial. The two primary requests served by this application are both initiated by the city. We are proposing to update the use tables for the general commercial, light industrial, and general industrial zones to change the marijuana facilities use from a conditional use to a not permitted use. This change is in response to City Council's passing of Ordinance 882 approving the ban on additional marijuana facilities, therefore bringing the Development Code into compliance. The second request is to amend Chapter 5, Miscellaneous Uses and Standards, to reserve subchapter 5.900 for future psilocybin standards. Those draft regulations have not yet been drafted. Here's an overview of the proposed amendments. Sorry if this is a bit repetitive. The changes are within Chapter 3, specifically Chapter 3.320, use table for commercial zoning districts. The only change is changing marijuana facilities from a conditional use in the general commercial zone to a not permitted use. In subchapter 3.420, the use table for industrial zoning districts, the same as the previous section. The change is changing a marijuana facilities from conditional use in the light industrial and general industrial zones to not permitted. And then in chapter 5, miscellaneous uses and standards, reserving a section under 5.900 for psilocybin standards. Here's a depiction of the proposed text amendments. You can see within the use tables, we are changing the C to an N for both the general commercial and then also within the industrial for the light industrial and general industrial zones. This is a snippet of what the proposed amendment would look like with the amendment to chapter 5 with the subchapter 5.900 psilocybin chapter as well. Here's a list of the proposed findings that both the staff and planning commission have reviewed. Staff believes all criteria are met. The procedure we'll use to consider this request is a type 4 land use application. Planning Commission's authority is to make the formal recommendation to council. At the public hearing on October 11th, Planning Commission voted to recommend approval of the text amendment to the City Council. City Council is the decision-making entity. The notice of application was provided as required by code. The action City Council is asked to take at this ordinance adoption hearing is to consider Planning Commission's recommendation, which is to approve the ordinance in the adoption of the draft development code in attachment A. Actions on tonight's meeting are to confirm, amend, or reverse Planning Commission's recommendation, enact or defeat all or part of the ordinance, remand some or all of the proposal back to PC. This concludes my staff presentation, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, sir. Councilor One.
Just want to clarify. I think I asked this question last time, but I want to clarify what I'm voting on exactly. So I was under the assumption that we as a city council voted to send it to the voters, correct?
Correct.
To whether they wanted to allow or disallow any more additional marijuana facilities in the city. Is that correct?
Correct.
Okay. So I would be voting on this. This text would go in only after that election or that was voted on, and if it passed, this would go in.
So
this would go in now.
This would go in now after the appeal, after the appeal deadline. Okay. So this is separate from that. That vote will still be happening next November, if that's correct, right? It's 2024, correct. I believe. Yep. So that will still be going. This will go into effect if it's approved, regardless of the vote. So this would go in.
Okay, this is separate.
This is a separate.
It is separate of that.
Correct.
Request. Okay. Thank you.
Any other questions from council?
I have a comment.
A comment from Councilor White.
Yeah, I know that psilocybin is mentioned in this change as a possible placeholder if that becomes approved. And I thought it was noteworthy to mention in the news, I heard that a airline pilot attempted to crash the jetliner, and his defense in the trial is that he the day before he had taken psilocybin, and he was in a dreamlike state, and he felt like the only way out of this bad dream was to crash the plane. So something to think about for the future.
Thank you, sir. Councilor Wittrin.
Question. So the placeholder for psilocybin is just a placeholder. It doesn't mean approved, disapproved. It doesn't mean just a placeholder for whatever language we want to use in the future.
Correct. No language has yet been written.
Right.
So it's just a placeholder within
Whatever
our
text
code.
we want to use.
As you saw under section 5, that's how it will look in the code, just as reserved.
Okay.
For whatever the city decides.
Correct.
Any other questions from council before I begin the public hearing? All right, let's go ahead and open up public hearing. So public hearing is open at this time regarding agenda item number 6, an ordinance, agenda item number 5, an ordinance adopting text amendments to chapters 3 and 5 of the Troutdale Development Code. If you wish to speak, go ahead and unmute yourself and state your name and city of residence for the record.
This is Paul Wilcox, Mayor Lauer.
Mr. Wilcox, go ahead.
Yes, I don't have anything to add to my comments or my testimony at the last meeting, but I do have a question regarding Councilor Caswell, whether she has a conflict of interest. She was absent when ordinance 882 was passed, so she can address whether she has a conflict of interest or not. I won't get into the details of that unless she wants to volunteer it.
Are you wanting me to speak?
Yeah, go ahead, Allison. You're free to speak.
Oh, okay. Yeah. I mean, the only thing that I can think of is that we leased to Tetra, and it's a marijuana dispensary. I don't know. I don't. But other than that, I can't think of anything applicable.
Mr. Trumke, what do you think?
Well, it doesn't, well, let me start off by saying with everything with the Government Ethics Commission, what they say is my thoughts don't count. You have to talk to them. So Councilor Caswell could recuse herself if she has any concerns about this. But renting to she said a dispensary. There are no dispensaries in Troutdale. That's a medical kind of facility, and all there are in Troutdale is recreational facilities. Unless there is a term in the lease that makes the revenue or profit from the sales in that facility, a portion of that payable to the landlord, called a performance lease or a performing lease. It may not have a conflict. It's possible it does because there is a facility there, but it doesn't affect that facility except to possibly increase its value. But I would leave that to Councilor Caswell to think about herself, and if she has questions, to talk to OGEC about it. But as I said, she may decide to simply recuse in order to avoid the appearance of any possible impropriety.
Councilor Caswell.
Yeah, I mean, if it would make everybody feel more comfortable, I could recuse myself. I don't have strong opinions on it, so I'd be happy to do that.
I don't think that she should recuse herself. I see a reason for it.
I think it's entirely up to you, Councilor Caswell, if you want to or not. It's not up to me. It's like you heard Mr. Trumke say, it's not even up to him, and he's our attorney. So I would say it's completely in it's your decision.
Yeah, I mean, sure, I will. I'll go ahead. I mean, it's probably just a safer thing to do, I guess. So, yeah.
Okay. Councilor Caswell has recused herself. Thank you very much. Okay, any other comments from Zoom? If you have a comment, go ahead and state your name and city of residence for the record. All right, anybody in council chambers? Anyone in council chambers? All right, go ahead and approach the desk and state your name and city of residence for the record.
Good evening, Mayor Lauer, City Councilors Tanny Stephenson, and I am a member of the Planning Commission. And these text amendments are just to clean things up as far as an error that was made in the past, and so that our development code lines up with 882. And the question came up that if the vote was in favor of marijuana, then the development code would be reflective of that at that time. This is just so that when someone looks at the code, it's clear what they can do and what they can't do.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Appreciate it. All right, I'm going to go ahead and close the public hearing. Any other comments or discussion or questions from council? Councilor One.
I just want to say that, Kenny, I appreciate what you had to say. I just think it was different than I think this is different than what we had talked about earlier. So I feel like what we had talked about earlier was setting this to the voters, letting the voters decide if they wanted to have any additional recreational facilities in the city of Troutdale. And we left it at that, is my understanding, and I'm perfectly fine with leaving that to the voters. We did not allow the facility to go into the space near the Safeway for the reasons that were decided, and I thought that those reasons were enough to vote for that. I don't think that us saying that no more facilities is what our job as city council should be. I just think it should go to the voters. I think we should wait for that to happen before we change any of our or adopt any more amendments to what's already there. And I think that what you were referring to was whatever got taken out of that allowed them to apply for the business permit in the first place shouldn't have ever been removed, and I'm fine with putting that back in. But I feel like this is more than just putting that one statement back in. And so I just wanted to say my piece, as opposed to I think that this is separate than the voting situation. I'm fine to put that one piece in that didn't allow them to apply for the permit to go next to where the Safeway was, and only to apply for permits in the industrial zones. I think that's fine, but I think that we should wait until after this goes to a vote to change anything. So, okay, that's all.
Thank you, Councilor One. Any other? Councilor Glantz.
Isn't part of the reason that we didn't get the dispensary, and wasn't it near Albertsons, not Safeway? Because it was by Mount Hood Community College and the middle school?
Yeah, it's now, I believe it's now Safeway.
It's now Safeway, it was Albertsons.
It was Albertsons. Safeway bought Albertsons, or Albertsons bought Safeway and kept Safeway. Yeah, same spot.
And I thought it wasn't just a mistake. I thought that we needed to get a ban in because there were other locations where we could end up in a similar location or similar problem.
Mr. Trunke.
What was it, number 880, ordinance 880, I think was the number.
882.
Okay, thank you. 882. It did have in it an immediate text change. It wasn't clear that all of the notices that were required by DLCD had gotten filed in the proper way. And so so the text has been put back in, the text that was accidentally omitted during putting it into tabular form, that was put back already and reinstated. This language was in that ordinance referring to the voters, but simply reiterates it to make sure that it is 100% done right, belt and suspenders. There were just some notice questions about whether or not it was done properly.
And by sending it to the voters, it's suspended, is my understanding, that it's suspended anyways until after that. So nobody can apply for a recreational marijuana license until after the vote anyways.
In theory, at least.
Yeah.
The matter is still on appeal at the Land Use Board of Appeals on that matter that you did here.
Okay.
So it hasn't been 100% decided, but in theory, yes. So I believe so. Legally, I believe so. But, I stand to be called wrong by the people who have the authority to do that.
Okay.
Okay, any other comments or questions from council?
Yeah.
Councilor One?
So, by doing this would in fact, and just make it easier for staff to like look real quick in the meantime. It goes to the voters. Let's say the voters vote it down. They don't want that. They want to allow them. So then does it revert back to, or do we have to, as a city council now, put in different language and approve different language to allow facilities?
It would come back up before council
I believe it would come back before council at that point.
To reverse what we potentially
And then
could
if
do.
we don't vote this in, and then it gets voted down, we don't have to really change anything, or we do. You said that language got put back in already, so I just want to.
Yeah, it was reinstated recently. Oh boy, does this go past the 2022 ordinance? I get myself in a box thinking about all the changes in these things. It's the industrial area one that I think is different.
But part of this is to get in line with 882 to code, correct?
This is
So
bringing
this
the code
isn't,
up.
this isn't necessarily about us and change, it's to get in line with with the actual code that Troutdale needs to do for the state of Oregon. Correct? Dakota?
Oh, sorry, yes.
Yes, yeah, so we're just lining up our code with the state. That's all we're doing with 882, and we're making a spot for the psilocybin for the future.
Making and the ordinance that was passed for 882, remanding it back to the voters.
Right.
And putting a ban on it currently in the city, this is bringing our code up to conformance with that. Because currently, if we don't change those from conditional to not permitted, then, and someone wants to come in for conditional approval of a marijuana facility, that's not in alignment with 882. Because 882 currently has a ban within the city of marijuana facilities until the vote, whatever the vote determination is. So this is bringing our code up to compliance with the ordinance 882. Yeah. And then the psilocybin is just a placeholder for whenever
For
we decide
the state, or whatever we decide.
So the industrial part of this was in 882. That's what I didn't recall right off the top of my head. Thank you. Yeah. So no, this doesn't change 882 other than to correct any possible notice deficiencies in 882 and makes it clear to somebody who's coming in to buy or rent a place that no, it's not allowed.
Okay. And then if it does get passed next year, then we're gonna have to do some work.
Right. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Right. Otherwise, under the way that it could work is once it's referred, it doesn't, the state can't license it. That could be a trap for somebody who comes in, buys a building, and then finds out, oh gosh, no, it doesn't work.
It's just making it clearer for everybody. And
right. It's
kind of being a pain in the butt.
Mm-hmm. Right.
And that's why we left those subsections that's referenced in those lines in the table. We left those subsections for reference down below. That still has more information on marijuana facilities, even though it's going to have a N for not permitted. They can still read up on that section rather than omitting that section completely. We did the work to put it in. We can leave it in there. And it's just going to change that it's not permitted in those zones.
Okay, thank you. Mm-hmm. I appreciate that. Makes it more clear. Thank you.
All right, no other comments or questions from council. This is our second reading of the ordinance, so I'd entertain a motion.
Well, I move adoption of an ordinance adopting text amendments to chapters 3 and 5 of the Troutdale Development Code.
I'll second.
All right. Thank you very much. Seconded by Councilor Glantz. Kenda, please.
Counselor One,
Yeah.
Mayor Lauer,
Yes.
Counselor White,
Yes.
Counselor Wittrin,
Yes.
Counselor Glantz,
Yes,
Counselor Ritma,
Yeah,
and Caswell has recused.
Correct.
She's abstaining. Okay.
Okay. So it passes 6-0 with one recusal. All right. Thank you very much, everybody. Thank you, Dakota. Appreciate it. And thank you for the questions. Counselor One. Let's move on to agenda item number 6, public hearing and ordinance introduction, amending Troutdale Municipal Code, Chapter 13.20 pertaining to dogs in city parks. Mr. Holton, Mr. Jacobson, the floor is yours. Good evening.
Good evening, Mayor and Council.
Yes, good evening, Mr. Mayor, members of the council. I am Travis Holton. I'm your Public Works Director. Sitting next to me is Jonah Jacobson, your Park Superintendent. And here we're here tonight to again talk about dogs in city parks. I will try to summarize my staff report. There's a fair amount of information in there, but I'll try to just hit the high points, but I don't want to summarize it too lightly because I know at least 1 or 2 councilors weren't here last time and there may be folks watching, so I'll try to hit the high points again. I'll start off by giving a kind of a quick outline of what we're going to talk about. I'll go through some background information about what the current code is, how we got here, and then what the proposed or draft ordinance would provide for, and how that comports with what the council direction was at the previous discussion. We are doing a first reading tonight, or an introduction, rather than bringing this back as a second reading, so we're not voting on anything tonight. This is just a chance to preview it, ask questions, have some discussion, and then give us any direction you want for a second reading. So Title 13 of the Troutdale Municipal Code addresses street trees, parks, and recreation areas. Drilling down a little further, Chapter 13.20.160 addresses domestic animals, and it speaks to dogs and other domestic animals. And I want to make a quick point of terminology that I'm going to say dogs a lot during this presentation, but strictly speaking, as far as the code is concerned, that means dogs or other domestic animals. But for the most part, most cases, what we're talking about is dogs. I mean, people do occasionally bring their cats or their ferrets or whatever, but
I was just going to stop you and say that I saw 2 days ago someone walking their dog and their ferret in downtown Troutdale.
I saw 2 ladies walking a pig at Depot Park.
At Depot Park.
You know, it happens, but just know that when I say dogs in the context of this discussion, I mean dogs and other domestic animals. Quickly, you know, part of the Chapter 13.20 is definitions, and these apply broadly to the whole other things to do with parks. There's a housekeeping element in here, and that the current definition of director is the Director of Community Development. That's because when the current ordinance was adopted, parks was part of community development. It is now, for several years now, quite a few years now, been part of Public Works. So this is the first time the opportunity has come around to make that housekeeping correction, that now director would be defined as the Director of Public Works rather than Community Development. The current Troutdale Municipal Code 13.20.160 states that dogs are prohibited from all city parks and greenways, regardless of leashed or not. It does grant some authority to the director to designate pet areas, which I interpret to mean within parks, where they are going to be either on or off leash. The city has relaxed its approach to dogs in parks to some degree, with previous directors using that authority fairly broadly to allow dogs in some parks, throughout those parks. But that means that we've had some changes that we've made where we've had, some are just practical, putting up waste stations where people are already taking dogs, or taking down no dog signs where directors have indicated they wanted to allow dogs. And it is a topic that does generate some buzz from our park users and others. The Parks Department feels a lot of questions about it because there is some ambiguity to folks now about whether dogs are allowed or whether they're not allowed. And then finally, in the recent Parks Master Plan process, they conducted quite a bit of outreach to park residents and park users, asking them what kinds of things they wanted to see in the parks. And there were a lot of options there, so nothing received a majority level type support, but the most popular choice was to allow dogs and have more access for dogs in parks. Let's put it that way. We did hold our grand opening for the first ever off-leash dog park in Troutdale here back on October 22nd. And a great kudos to Jonah and his crew for getting that all ready to go. And it's a great event. And I really want to send a shout out to Kimberly and Ray's office, who did a wonderful job organizing the event. Thank you for that. So we have an off-leash dog park now, which is wonderful. Whether or not that meets the needs of the citizens is, of course, up to you all to decide. There was a question asked at the previous meeting about what the allowances are in our neighboring cities, so I did look into that and found that our three neighbors, Gresham, Fairview, or Village, don't have any prohibitions on dogs. They generally allow dogs in their parks, so I just wanted to answer that question from last time. And you'll see the exhibit B that's attached with the staff report does reflect the results of the outreach that was done and showing that dog-friendly park access was a top choice among the folks that were polled. Now, even though there are a lot of folks that want dogs in parks, we have to remain conscious that some folks aren't comfortable with that. They're not comfortable around dogs. They may even be afraid of dogs. That's perfectly understandable. So as we were working on this with the PAC, we tried to build in some things that would, if dogs were allowed in parks, there would be some protections for those folks. And even if dogs are allowed in some parks, there are places even within such parks that could be ill-suited for dogs. So there are some areas that would have to be protected. So, provisions in this draft ordinance that would allow us to protect certain areas, particularly environmentally sensitive areas or things where we have to protect because of certain provisions of environmental permits that we're bound to and so forth. This was also an opportunity to improve the enforcement provisions of that part of the code. Right now, the only enforcement tool we really have for someone who's causing a problem in the park is to eject them. But if they return, our recourse is to eject them again. So that's really not much of an incentive for someone who's ejected to not come back. So we looked at what you see in many other parts of the code, which is where we have progressive enforcement, and we put a very similar provision into this draft that if someone's ejected for a park and keeps coming back, that they can be cited and fined for that. The Parks Advisory Committee spent a lot of time talking about this, several meetings at least. I think I've recorded a number of them. And city staff worked with them closely in trying to draft the proposed ordinance. And that resulted in us bringing an ordinance to the council on October 10th that would have allowed dogs, generally allowed dogs in city parks, and then had provisions for where they could be prohibited. The city council was not in favor of that proposal. And in the course of that discussion, the council indicated that what they might be or might rather have is the ability for the council to designate parks where dogs can be allowed on leash. So that's what you'll see before you tonight in the draft resolution. Is we've made some changes in our best efforts to respond to what we thought we heard from the council. So the updates, I'll quickly kind of go through the updates just to summarize them. We worked on the definitions. Some of them were just to facilitate some of these new approaches to how dogs are regulated in parks, as well as the housekeeping provision I mentioned earlier about changing the definition director. The current proposed ordinance that's before you does retain the general exclusion for dogs in parks. So it does not change that. Under this proposed ordinance, dogs are still generally prohibited in parks, both on and off leash. We did add new language that would establish that the city council may establish or designate specific parks where dogs can be allowed on leash, generally throughout the park. It still includes certain exclusionary areas that are just defined exclusions, like playgrounds, sports fields, and beaches. One thing we did change from the last proposal you saw with regard to designated exclusionary areas is we removed the 100-foot buffer from surface waters. That was a concern for some folks that commented last time that, for instance, the Beaver Creek Canyon would pretty much be off limits, which it currently is off limits under the current code and would be off limits under the proposed code. However, if the council were to designate that as an on-leash area, we still had the 100-foot buffer in there, it would essentially negate it. So we took that out. after consulting with our environmental specialists and looking at our stormwater permits and determining that we think we can do that without DEQ being too upset with us. Of course, this keeps some of the general rules for dogs, some of the basic rules that would be broadly applicable at any park where the council chose to allow dogs on leash. That's just to sort of establish some real baseline rules so that if dogs are allowed into any of the parks, that we have those to fall back on, regardless of whatever other specific rules might be drafted. And then, as I mentioned earlier, this proposed ordinance includes updates to the enforcement section, specifically the authority to eject and exclude, adding that progressive enforcement system if someone refuses to comply with an exclusion order. And then lastly, as I talked about at the last meeting, the current code empowers the city to seize the property, that any city staff person really, as well as the police, to seize the property of any person that violates a park rule or seize the property that is used in violation of a park rule. And the staff felt that when it comes to pets, that's a fairly sensitive type of property, and maybe we shouldn't have such broad authority when it comes to pets. And so we did include in the draft ordinance some exclusions saying that basically the staff can't take away a person's pet just because they violated a park rule. It clearly states, though, that a police officer can still seize a pet if they are in violation of the Multnomah County Animal Services Ordinance or in state law. That summarizes my staff report. You have the red line draft of the ordinance available to you here in the council packet, as well as the clean version, and I'll be happy to answer any questions, and I'm sure Jonah will be happy to jump in and answer any questions he can from the perspective of the Parks Department.
Sure. Councilor Glantz.
Yep, there were some questions last time about parks that already allowed dogs, specifically Sunrise Park, and we were told that no parks allowed dogs. But then we saw pictures later that it did say dogs allowed. Did we do the survey yet of which parks truly allow dogs and which ones don't?
I don't know if Jonah can answer that off the top of his head, but that goes back to what I referred to earlier, that the existing code does allow the director to designate pet areas. And so previous directors, I think, have construed that fairly broadly to say that means that they could designate, say, Sunrise Park. The entire park is a pet area. And so, and I think in Sunrise Park, the no dog signs were taken down quite some time ago.
Yes, there are signs at Sunrise Park that say dogs allowed, and I believe that was done through through some of the experiments in allowing pets under previous directors and park supervisors that happened in the past that Travis has referenced. I believe that Sunrise Park would be a prime candidate for the first park to review under this amendment to the code. If this council would like to, in later sessions, discuss the question of dogs actually being allowed in Sunrise Park officially.
And do you know of any other parks that specifically allow dogs?
That is the only one, other than our new dog park.
Okay. Thank you.
Any other comments and questions from council? Councilor Ritma?
Yes, despite the fact that I didn't want to get into this tonight, I respect the vote. And I want to say that this version of the ordinance addresses most all of the concerns I had with the previous one. I think the change, having the council by resolution designate certain parks as on-leash parks is good. And then except for those, dogs are prohibited. I would request that in 132160B, which is the red line of Exhibit A. I don't have a page number. B, Section A has the council by resolution designating parks. That's the way we can legalize the parks like Sunrise Parks that are clearly for dogs, and dogs should be allowed, and I'm all in favor of that. And as we discussed on October 10th, the Columbia Park off-leash area has to be legalized somehow. Perhaps there was a director's designation that took care of it, but we can clear that up if we need to. The only other one I was in favor of was Beaver Creek Canyon, opening that up for on-leash dog usage. But the section B, except as provided in A, which is the council designating certain parks, no person shall bring a dog or other domestic animal into a park on or off leash except within designated pet areas specifically designated by the director. I would prefer that that be areas specifically designated by the council by resolution. That's the one change. The rest, the director has lots of other authority in here that I have no problem with. But that is a change I would request when it comes back, that that be either made or considered by the council. In other words, the director can't just, without council resolution or discussion, approve what was a park that didn't allow dogs to allow dogs. I think that would be better. But other than that, I commend the staff on this. I think it looks good.
Okay, thank you, Councilor Rittma. Any other comments or questions before we open up the public hearing?
Yes, I have a few.
Yeah, go ahead, Councilor White.
Okay, I'd like to see the leash length be changed to 6 feet because it matches what is said. I'm having to hold the phone and turn pages here, and in 13.20.160 domestic animals, section G and H state calls out 6 feet, but then we're allowing an 8-foot leash. So just for sake of matching that up, I think they should all three be 6 feet.
I think
If I can offer a suggestion on that.
Well, it says within 6 feet of another dog or domestic animal or another handler. So
I think what Councilor White's saying is you can't allow someone you can't allow your dog to get within 6 feet of a person, but the leash length is 8 feet. The math there is you'd have to be standing 14 feet away from the person.
Right.
Those would be additive.
well, but if someone else has their dog and they have to be 6 feet away from my dog, and my leash goes 6 feet and their leash goes 6 feet, then we have to be standing even farther apart. So I don't really think it matters, but
it doesn't.
For what it's worth, the reason that 8 feet was chosen as the leash length is because that is the same as the Multnomah County Animal Services Ordinance. So
okay.
The thinking there was you're walking your dog to the park, the county code says you have to have him on an 8 foot or less leash. When you get to the park, you're still using the same 8-foot leash. Obviously, I'm happy to change it to whatever the council wants. That's just explaining what the thinking was behind it.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Councilor White, do you have any more follow-up questions?
Yes, I've got quite a few.
Well, let's get to
them. And then, so I'm confused that the previous director had the authority to allow dogs in parks that had an ordinance that said no dogs allowed. I'm having trouble understanding that.
Well, my reading of it is it's how many ordinances, I don't know, a number of ordinances are written. There's a rule and then it gives an exception to the rule. And that's how it was written back whenever this previous ordinance was created, that it said the general rule is dogs aren't allowed in the parks, and then it gave the director the authority to designate areas for pets. My interpretation of that as a director would be that authorized the director to designate areas within parks. So not an entire park, but certainly it's broadly enough written that a previous director could have construed it to, you get into a game of inches. Okay, well, I designated 99% of the park dogs on leash, therefore it's within a park. You know, you're sort of getting the semantics at that point. I certainly would have looked at it as, this doesn't say, you know, taking it within the context of the existing ordinance. I wouldn't have taken that to mean that as a director, you could just designate an entire park. I would have taken it, but the seeming spirit or intent was that if you wanted to create an off-leash dog park area, for instance, within a park, the director could do that. But as it's written, I think certainly, and previous directors have certainly felt that you can construe that broadly enough to basically mean an entire park.
Okay. Next question, Councilor White.
The part about a person in the park that doesn't want to be approached by a dog has to verbally tell the other person. I just think that's kind of unfair. I think anybody walking a dog in a park should have to just do that on their own. I'm not going to tell some guy walking a couple pit bulls that, hey, I don't want your dog near me. You know, it just doesn't add up. I mean, I just think that we should change that statement to just be, you can't be a certain distance from another park goer. Now, if somebody goes, hey, can I pet your dog? That's a different situation altogether. But to put that burden on the person that might be afraid of dogs, or, you know, some people do have a deep-rooted fear of dogs, and I think we need to respect that if we're going to start allowing dogs in parks.
Okay.
And then I also wanted to know, what is the enforcement mechanism? Who is going to enforce when somebody lets their dog off leash? Is it up to a person to call in a complaint, or are we going to have people monitoring this, or how's that going to work?
Well, right now we have no dedicated enforcement staff. We just have our parks maintenance workers, or potentially, you know, myself or somebody else that from the city staff that might be in a park at any given time. So it's really just by chance that if we see someone running the dog off leash, and I think Jonah will attest to this, we will tell them, hey, you need to put that dog on a leash. If the dog were even allowed on a leash in the park, if we're not allowed in the park at all, we'd say, you know, you have to take your dog out of the park. But there's nobody, we don't have park rangers. We don't have folks that are enforcing any of the park rules full time. So it's really a matter of, excuse me, if there's anybody from the city staff that happens to be there at that time. We do get occasional complaints. I think you've mentioned, Jonah, you can correct me if I'm wrong. People call in and say, hey, you know, I was at the park, this person's running their dog off leash. You know, what are you gonna do about it? And to be honest, there's not a lot we can do about it in those situations, because all we have is someone's saying that they saw this on, you know, telling us this on the phone. We don't even know who they're talking about. You know, they don't know who the person was. So, so the enforcement capability is fairly limited, and that's just the fact of the matter.
If I may.
Yeah, that's a big concern I have, because I've been to a lot of on-leash dog parks, and as soon as they get in the park, you know, the dogs are released. And
let Jonah was going to make a comment of that as well. Just 1 second.
I would just add that I don't have the CBA in front of me, but I don't believe that law enforcement is included in the job descriptions of parks workers in their collective bargaining agreement. I myself, when I observe somebody running their dog off leash in a park where that is not permitted, I kindly and respectfully approach the person and ask them to put their dog on a leash first and foremost, and tell them that their dog is actually not allowed in the park at all, but at the very least, you need to put it on a leash right now. Most people are receptive to that, and more so now that we have an off-leash dog park that I can tell them is available for them to use. That being said, you know, that when I observe somebody running their dog off leash, I generally will approach them and talk to them about it and ask them to please stop what they're doing. But that being said, I don't expect the parks workers who are on my staff to be enforcing the law. That's not part of their job description.
So who is going to do it?
I'll just add, Counselor White, that that's a challenge under the existing ordinance. You have a rule that says dogs aren't allowed in the park, and yet people bring dogs to the parks constantly, every park.
Every day.
Every
hour.
Well, that had a lot to do with that silent approach of taking no dogs allowed signs down and adding doggy cleanup bags. I mean, that had a lot to do with that, and still does.
There's no question.
Yeah.
Okay, next comment, Counselor White.
How are we going to notify nearby residents of a park that is maybe chosen to have dogs in it? Because I think they should be notified at the bare minimum.
That's not contemplated by this ordinance, but the staff will conduct whatever notification process the council directs.
So it is if the director is going to allow dogs in a designated area of a park.
I'm sorry, can you repeat that?
If the director has the authority to allow a designated area of a park to have dogs in it, even though dogs aren't allowed in that park, I think it should be included that the neighbors are notified, so they're made aware of it. Because my concern is barking. The reason we picked the location for our brand new dog park was because it didn't have residents nearby it. And if you look up the code to do like a dog kennel business, there are major hurdles to allow that, and you have to be so far from residents, and because it's a legitimate concern. So that's why I'm asking that.
So what was the question?
How are we going to notify residents when a change is going to occur to a park that's near them? Someone that's in range of hearing the barking.
Right, Travis, he answered that. He said he would conduct any notifications that the council would direct staff to do.
Okay. And then since the council has is going to be deciding which parks are going to allow dogs, does that mean that the parks that currently don't allow dogs, like Glen Auto, are we going to remove those dog stations and put no dogs allowed signs back up? The ones that were removed?
Well, it would certainly be our intent to restore signage to match the regulation wherever it's deficient. The dog waste stations, I think that's probably worth a discussion. I totally understand that it's a mixed signal, and it's one of those really difficult ones where it's practicality versus messaging. So we have areas where people are taking dogs despite the ordinance. When they do that, we want them to clean up after them, even though they're not supposed to be there. So we're kind of in a catch-22. And I'd certainly welcome the council's input on that, because that's one of those situations where we're really kind of stuck between a rock and a hard place as staff. Is what's the right thing to do here? Do we?
Yeah, and again, that situation was created by the previous director, so please don't take offense, but I think it's something that needs to be corrected before, so we can go forward.
Yeah, no offense taken. I'm honestly presenting the dilemma in these situations that we find ourselves in, where you may have a park where dogs are not allowed, but as we talked about, the enforcement capability is very limited. So people are bringing their dogs anyway. And then if that happens and there aren't facilities for them to clean up after their dog, we're sort of doubling the problem. But at the same time, we're sending a mixed message. Like I said, that's a really tough one to sort of thread the needle on. And I will welcome council's input on what they think the best way to go there is. I certainly think I hear what you're saying, Councilor White, and I'd be interested in what the rest of the council thought too, because I know I've heard that discussion between past directors and park superintendents, that it's just it's a dilemma. You know, what's the better move?
Yeah. Councilor White, Councilor White, let's hold that discussion for a second and get through your questions. You've almost been speaking for a half hour now, so we need to let other councilors get to their comments and questions before we hold public hearing. So let's keep moving.
Okay. I just wanted to state that I agree with Councilor Rittman's request that the council be involved in any of the resolutions that staff creates. I wish we would have been involved when signs were being taken down and these stations were being put up. We should have been involved. And we've repeatedly have told staff that, you know, don't make our job easier. That's what we're here for, because we're the ones really that have to answer to the public. When a change like that occurs and they're upset, we get the calls. And we represent the citizens, so we need to be involved. I know I'll let you continue there with public comment, Mayor Lauer. Sorry for the extended time.
Oh no, don't be sorry. I appreciate it. I appreciate the conversation. I'm going to move to Councilor One. He had his hand up before Councilor Glantz. If you,
Man, I'm ready to go. So as the only dissenting member from this last meeting, I want to just bring a couple of thoughts to everybody's forefront in that. One is that every neighboring city that is around us has no dog, disallowances anywhere. I think that's really important to remember, that dogs can walk freely in those cities without being reprimanded by their staff. I think that the idea of, I believe that we should have let dogs in all of our parks. And I realized that after our last discussion that not everybody was on board with that. And that's why I kind of suggested that we pick some parks to allow dogs into. And I'm appreciative of that democratic process. I can get along with that. I think when if we do pass this, we need to think about geographically allowing parks kind of in each geographic area of the city to allow people in those areas easy access to a park to walk their dog safely without having to be reprimanded. And then I just think it's important that we all keep in mind that each of our, each of the public comments that we had were in favor of allowing dogs in parks and having access to walk their dogs in parks. And also the Parks Committee recommended allowing it, I think by a vote of 10-1, if I'm not mistaken. So I think those are important things to think about, not just because I have a dog and I want access to the park. I walk my dog in Sunrise, illegally or not illegally, however we want to determine that. And a lot of other people do also. And there's a couple of people in those parks that's their way of socializing with people, that they take their dog out and then they've made friends and I think that if our main reason is that we don't want a dog to be off leash in a park and we don't want a certain dog type to come up to me or to us or to our families, I think that that's kind of short-sighted, and that could spill over into a lot of different areas. We can't control people. And I just think that's a little bit of not a good reason to say no to something like this that would benefit so many people. So appreciate everybody listening.
thank you. Thank you for your patience. Councilor Glantz.
Mute, lower hand. Yeah, a couple quick notes. I thought we were just asking questions, not doing comments. On the not having enforcement, that was part of the reason that we also considered having some parks that allowed dogs and some didn't, because that will also allow us to be a lot more clear with signage and say, no dogs allowed here, but you can go here. And then, it's only like 30% of households have dogs. So why would we have dogs in 100% of parks? It's not that I don't like dogs, I do, but sometimes it's kind of offensive how owners think their dogs are so cute. And so when the dog runs up to you, slobbering all over you in inappropriate places, that it's cute. And it's not, it's kind of gross. And the survey, we keep going back to that, there was a lot of people that said, yeah, let's do it. But remember, that was also multiple choice. So it's not like that was the only thing they chose. They chose lots of things. And then I also think we should do a bit of a campaign to educate at some point and say, here's the parks, go have fun with your dogs. Here's the parks that people don't want to have dogs and have a look at the choice. So it's not that I don't like dogs. It's just not my thing. Thanks.
Thank you, Councilor Glantz. Any other comments or questions? Councilor Wittrin?
Yeah, and I'll just say as we are looking for a compromise here to represent all of the city, and I'm not a huge dog fan by any means, but it is a compromise that we're looking at here, and some parks, if we go forward, and we're going to, by resolution, be able to have some parks. And as Councilor White was saying, he doesn't think it's fair that we're going to have to tell the person with a dog, make sure to keep your dog away from me. But we're going to have the choice as a non-dog owner to go to a park that we know is going to be dog free. So that is going to be our option as well. And if we stick with the metric of 30% are dog users and 30% of our parks are going to be dog friendly out there, I'm going to have a 70% chance of going to a park, and I'm going to be able to pick my park and not run into a dog. So we're just trying to find the best solution for our community and our constituents. So there's my 2 cents.
Okay. Councilor Caswell, do you have any questions or comments?
Nope, I don't.
Okay. I'm going to go ahead and
Randy, I did have one final question that I thought of during this discussion.
Okay, Councilor White, go ahead.
One. Okay, so if it sounds like the council is thinking we're going to have parks that don't allow dogs, but I'm reading this that the director can designate areas within a park that doesn't allow dogs for dogs. Am I correct in thinking that, or?
That was Travis's interpretation.
Correct. That's part of the existing code language. Council Ritma had suggested changing that language, which of course, if that's the consensus of the council, that's what.
Okay. As long as we can determine that, I want to make sure that gets into the next read of this. And one quick comment: a lot of our surrounding cities have, like Wood Village has one park. So to compare that to Troutdale, it has like 23 parks. We should be able to pick certain parks that don't allow dogs, period. And because not everybody has a dog and not everybody wants a dog. And, the surveys can be skewed quite easily. I remember when the Audubon Society was emailing us 100 emails a day about the Lights Out program. So, it's a special interest group, but we have to be conscious of the entire population and residents of Troutdale.
Okay, thank you, sir. All right, I'm going to go ahead and open up public hearing at this time. Public hearings open on agenda item number 6, an ordinance amending Troutdale Municipal Code, Chapter 13.20, pertaining to dogs in City Park. If you wish to make a comment on Zoom, go ahead and unmute yourself and state your name and city of residence for the record.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, my name is Lori Hansen. I'm from Gresham. I live about 3 blocks away from the brand new dog park and off-leash dog park. And I just want to thank all the city councilors who voted for that, because it's a tremendous asset to our community. We have really enjoyed it. I've actually met more of my neighbors that I have in the last 7 years I've lived in this community. So it's just a really wonderful asset, and we just really appreciate it. I wanted to make some comments about this change. Just wanted to kind of give some food for thought. I know Multnomah County, just to kind of talk about enforcement, I know Multnomah County Animal Control does enforce off-leash. If you were to post signs that stated that you could call them if you saw an off-leash dog, I have done that myself, and they are pretty responsive. So that's something to consider when you're talking about enforcing. I've come in, I'm a dog owner myself, and I absolutely understand and appreciate that not everybody loves dogs and that people do have actual fears of dogs. So I certainly, want to be sensitive to the rest of the community members there. But at the same time, I think that there is definitely a need for more dog-friendly parks in our community. We do have quite a few parks. They're not necessarily in the Troutdale area, but that don't allow dogs, like Dabney State Park, Blue Lake, and Oxbow are 3 that are completely dog-free, and those are metro, of course. But if somebody wants to get away, they can go and be in a dog-free area that has like hiking trails and things that would attract people. So that's one thing. I also agree that that playgrounds should remain dog-free, because kids can be pretty afraid of dogs in general, and a lot of times, like as a mom and a grandma myself, I've had to clean up a lot of dog issues, from people that weren't cleaning up dogs. So that's another thing to take into consideration. But those are just some of the things I kind of wanted to bring up as possible points for you all to consider when you're thinking about this. The other thing is I'm a single woman who likes to walk my dog, and I do feel safer when I have my dog with me. So being able to go to a park with the dog is a measure of safety for me, as well as enjoyment. So you may not, we may only have 30% of the communities in Troutdale that have dogs, but I know that some of them do consider them protection when they're out and about. So another thing to consider.
Okay. Thank you, Lori. Appreciate your comments.
Sure thing.
Anybody else wishes to make public comment regarding this matter? Now's the time. Go ahead and unmute yourself and state your name and city of residence for the record.
Mayor, this is Adrian Kester, Troutdale.
Mr. Kester, go ahead.
I just have 2 very brief comments. One related to the 30% number related to Councilor Glantz. While I do not doubt that particular statistic, I would suspect that the percentage of households that are park going would be significantly higher than 30%. As a portion of the non-dog owning Troutdale public are not park users. But most of the dog owning Troutdale public would very likely be park users. So I just wanted to throw that out. The other comment that I had is that I think it would behoove the city and council to consider how much more restrictive we want walkways and in neighborhood parks to be than simply public sidewalks within the city of Troutdale, where people can walk their dogs on leash, on sidewalks, all they want, right? Because people walk up and down their streets when they're walking their dog. They walk around the block. I think it would be very incongruous for the dog owning public and the non-dog owning public to have significantly more restrictive rules on walkways in neighborhood parks, which in many cases look very much like extensions to city sidewalks, than the rules that apply to city sidewalks themselves. So that's all I had. Thank you for listening.
Thank you, Adrian. Appreciate it. Any other comments or questions from Zoom? Now's the time. Go ahead and unmute yourself, state your name and city of residence for the record.
Hi, my name is Carol Reynolds. I live in Troutdale. I've rewritten my notes tonight several times based on everybody's comments tonight. So first of all, I want to say thank you for allowing me to participate in the discussions. I'm a dog owner. And of course, I think anybody may remember me from my discussion a couple of weeks ago about being in Sunrise Park. But I did have a couple of observations as well from today's commentary on one of the questions on who's going to enforce some of these rules. And I can tell you that the park goers are pretty good at enforcing this. If there's a problem dog in the park, the citizens are really good at calling for help or confronting the issue, or even banding together and confronting the issue as a group. I walk my poodles in Sunrise Park. I walk my poodles in the neighborhood. And I said before that I feel safe walking in Sunrise Park because there's a lot of people there and a lot of like-minded folks that are out there enjoying the area in a safe manner, whether they're kids, people with dogs, people without dogs. One of the counselors tonight suggested that once we allow leash dogs in park, that we tend to get to the park and let our dogs off leash. And I can guarantee you that that's not the case for most leash people. And it's the leash people that are out there picking up their poop and watching out for each other. So I've never seen this as an issue in Sunrise Park, except as the rare occasion. Regarding notifying residents, I think if you go to any park and spend any time there now, there are dogs in the parks. And I think the residents will be more than happy to know that we're putting some more restrictions in place that are actually a little more enforceable. And that there'll be good people out there helping them enforce these rules. And on the 30% of homes in Troutdale that are supposed to be pet owners, I live in a small neighborhood in a very small section, and we have about 15 houses in our neighborhood, and 13 of us have dogs. And I'd say 12 of us use Sunrise Park. So I think you're going to find that there are probably more people in the area that do have dogs, and we do use the parks. And the more of us that use the parks, the safer the parks will be. So I appreciate you allowing me to speak tonight, and I hope to see all of you out there in our parks with and without your dogs, because the more of us use it, the more of us will continue to use it. So thank you.
Thank you, Carol. Appreciate it. Any other comments from Zoom? Okay, any comments from council chambers? Okay, I'm going to go ahead and close public hearing. So, Mr. Wilcox, you can fact check me if you would like. I believe the first time that I heard that we were talking about this and discussing this on Troutdale City Council, I was absolutely dumbfounded. I think I used the word dumbfounded that we did not allow dogs in the parks. I was very surprised that we had actual restrictions on dogs in our city parks. Councilor White's correct. Wood Village does only have one park, and they allow dogs on leash. And coming from that city, the city employees, it wasn't in the purview of the city employees' job description to go and police that park. But I will say, as a former city employee there, that when we did encounter it, and we encountered it a lot, and we encountered some citizens that enjoyed having their dogs off leash, and we encountered some citizens that did not enjoy dogs off leash. And both instances, we used it as an opportunity to educate and just say, just so you know, dogs are supposed to be on leash in the park. So if you wouldn't mind doing that, that would be fantastic, so everyone can enjoy. Most of the time, everybody obeyed that and welcomed that little bit of education that we gave them. Now, the city of Fairview has probably 180 parks in their 4 square miles. They have so many parks. And all of those parks, for the majority of them, we have a lot of pocket parks over there, but the majority of them, dogs are welcome on leash. To speak to removing, we call them doggy pot stations, dog bag stations in the parks. yes, I agree with our director, Mr. Travis Holton, that it does kind of it does send a mixed signal about dogs being welcomed in parks where dogs aren't permitted. But as the superintendent for the Parks Department in our neighboring city, and to share the same hat that Jonah wears here for Troutdale, without those doggy pot stations and without those bags, we would be fighting a mountain of filth. And it's not because people don't care and people wouldn't use them if the bags aren't there, but they are there. And people are creatures of comfort and habit and ease of access. Without that, it would be, we have parks where we didn't have that in the few years that I've been at Fairview, and the change in the amount of waste that we don't have to pick up anymore is substantial. So while I agree that it is a mixed message, it's a mixed message that doesn't come with a really bad smell and messy shoes. So again, like I said, I was dumbfounded when I found out that we didn't allow dogs in all parks. And as a former dog owner, our dog passed away a year ago this month. She was going to be 21. She was old and not replaceable. So we are probably not going to be dog owners moving forward. I would appreciate Troutdale in whatever fashion, in whatever form and function that the council determines to be more of a dog-friendly city, because I think our citizens deserve to have that option. But I agree with Councilor Wittrin, and I agree with the other councilors that they also have the option to not be surrounded by dogs all the time as well. I didn't know if anybody else had any other comments or questions. This is just the first reading, so we're not taking a vote. Now would be the time before it comes back again in front of council. Councilor Ritma.
Just, I repeat my request that 1320-160 B saying no dogs are allowed except within designated pet areas specifically designated by, I would prefer that be made, or at least an option be offered to us, that be the council by resolution, not the director. Everything else is okay.
Okay.
And I would also just suggest that when it comes back, bring back an appropriate resolution that designates, well, we don't have to decide it tonight, I guess, but at least the Columbia Park off-leash area, which is maybe legal as it is, Sunrise Park and the Beaver Creek Canyon as places that permit dogs. And that way we could adopt that at the same time and have everything legalized. But I don't insist on that. It just seems like a good idea.
I think it's a great idea. Do we have any comments or questions regarding what Councilor Ritma just stated? Councilor Glantz.
I don't have any questions about what he just stated, but I had a different question.
Go ahead. Yeah, go ahead.
I'm curious, is it the expectation when a dog owner takes their dog to a park that the park provides a way to clean up for their dog? Is that normal?
That would be typical in most parks I've been to that allow dogs on leash. And I think as a practical matter, if you want people to clean up after their dogs, it really behooves you to provide that.
That's fine. I mean, when I see people walking on the streets, they usually have the baggie with them. So I didn't know if that was the norm.
I could add, yes, good dog owners and walkers always carry them with you. Every one of my cars has one of them, and I still have some for those council members that get them, the little Troutdale logoed doggy bag containers. If you want one, I still have a couple left. So.
Well, and I guess I can offer a personal perspective in that, yes, I walk my dog on the street and always carry my little bag dispenser, except once in a while when the dispenser's empty and I didn't realize it,
Mm-hmm.
And you're halfway around the block and you're like, oh, now I got to run back to the house, So occasionally I think people just find themselves without the necessary means by no intention. They just goofed up, forgot their bags.
Hey, Randy,
Counselor White.
and I think it's important to remember that the bags only solve half the problem of sanitation. So if kids are playing in the grass or someone wants to have a picnic in a park on the grass, there could be some real sanitation and health issues associated with that as well.
I hear what you're saying, but I mean, to play devil's advocate, bags don't solve any problem. The responsible dog owner solves their own problem by utilizing the bags that we have in the parks. But I get.
What I meant by half the problem was number 1 and number 2.
I see what you did there, Counselor White. Thank you. Any other comments or questions? Counselor Rittma, I do not disagree with what you stated.
Thank you.
I just want to say one thing, that I know dogs are a very sensitive subject, and I hope I didn't offend anybody. I've owned a dog most of my life. I don't have one currently, but my son and daughter both do, and I enjoy their dog very much. And so please don't take offense. We're just trying to think of everyone, not just the dog owners.
Yep, absolutely. Thank you, Counselor White.
I appreciate Counselor Rittma's forethought to include something for the meantime on this next reading, but is there a way we can at least have some more forethought, maybe a couple, after adoption, maybe a couple of meetings later, to maybe think of 2 or 3 other parks in the city, geographically speaking, that maybe people could walk to besides the ones that basically everybody already knows about. And I think that I just want to say, like, Beaver Creek it's fine, it's great. It's actually not easy to get down there for a lot of people. I tried to get down there with my dog and I was like, yeah, no, I just turned right back around and came back up. So just thinking of that, like, I just want to have something in place that we think of it and have it on the place card.
I think that's a good idea, because if this does come back with Counselor Rittma's suggestion and wording, changing that to council's decision rather than, no offense, director's decision, then it would be up to us to have those discussions, and we can put those on later council agendas. Absolutely.
I just don't want to.
We can always add more. We can always.
I just didn't want to do what we did, and then we kind of forgot about it, and then it just kind of went to the wayside. So that was all.
Council one could always add them, and then we could take it as amended too. For the resolution, correct?
If I may.
Yeah, please.
And I guess I want to ask for the city attorney's input on this. This being an ordinance, it typically wouldn't go into effect for 30 days following adoption, correct?
Correct.
Yeah, so I don't know that it would really work to have the resolution the same night as this.
Unless it took effect 31 days after the ordinance too.
Yeah, it could make it effective at the same day.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then to Councilor Woon's suggestion, our presumption was that, and of course we should never be presumptuous, but our presumption was that most likely you would ask the Parks Advisory Committee to talk about it and come up with a recommended list of parks for the council to consider designating. But if there are a couple that you think are some chunks, like say Sunrise Park or Canyon or something like that, of course we'd be happy to bring back that resolution on the same night as the second reading, and we would just make that resolution go into effect on the 31st day following adoption of the ordinance.
Okay.
And then potentially ask the PAC to consider it and suggest potentially other parks that they think might be appropriate for the council to consider.
Yeah, I think that's a good suggestion, and I think that resonates with what we just discussed. So consider that marching orders.
Very good. And then one thing I just want to make sure is clear, and I'm happy to do this, is that the consensus of the council, Councilor Rittma's suggestion about the areas designated by the director, which I personally don't think is necessary with the new form of this ordinance. Although I would have a spin on it, which is you could just strike that part of that section, because you don't need to say designated by the council. Paragraph A already says the council's going to designate it. If you just strike that, you're taking away the exception given to the director entirely.
So you're saying it's redundant?
It would be
if we
redundant if
add.
you changed it to council, you could just strike it. The second part of that sentence, you basically strike everything after off leash.
Council Ritma, do you see that?
I do, but I made this suggestion because I think it's okay to have the option of designated pet areas specifically designated by the council in some parks. That may be an option. I don't see any reason to strike it.
Gotcha, makes sense. Yeah.
Thank you for the clarification. All right, no other comments or questions? Okay, thank you, everybody, for the discussion. I appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you all.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Charles.
All right, moving on to agenda item number 7, staff communications. Mr. Ray Young.
Thank you, Mayor. I have 6. Number 1, there will not be a council meeting until December 12th. Traditionally, we don't have one around the Thanksgiving holiday, so we won't this year. It'll be December 12th, but you won't get away scot-free till then, because number 2, our half-yearly budget committee meeting will be the week before on December 5th. So that's always a fun and exciting time to see how we're doing financially and what things look like. 3, we also have a great event also before the half-yearly meeting. Our Windy Winterland, our new name, not Winder, it's Windy this year, Wonderland, will be the weekend of December 1st, 2nd, and 3rd. And also that Friday, December 1st, will be our famous tree lighting ceremony in downtown Troutdale. So I look forward to that first weekend of December to have a fun weekend of great activity in downtown Troutdale. Last year was the first year we did all weekend long with booths and stuff downtown, very successful, and we're doing the same this year. I believe we're doing it at the Troutdale House as opposed to the general store that we did last year, so we have an indoor area for our area, so that'll be fun. Number 4, of course, we will be closed. City offices are closed the Thursday and Friday of Thanksgiving, which is next week. Thanksgiving's early this year. Number 5, if you've noticed, we are in the middle of doing major ADA improvements at Columbia Park, but it does not impact the usage of the park. Just parking is a little difficult there in the cul-de-sac, but the park is fully open for use. And then finally, if you haven't driven downtown lately, it is so nice to know that in working with the developer and Away Days Brewery, we are back on track. Things are moving forward at the old City Hall. Windows are in, siding is going on this week. They hope to be ready to open in early spring at this point. So it's exciting to finally see that project really starting to pick up a little more speed. So that's been great. Thank you, Mayor.
Very excited. Move on to next agenda item, council communications. Let's go with Councilor 1.
I do have one. I'm really excited about this, you guys. So, about a month ago, there was my brother-in-law and sister-in-law live on Sunrise Park, and there was somebody camping behind one of the bushes right on the other side by their house. And so my brother-in-law called me and asked me what I should do. I said, you should call non-emergency. He couldn't get through. I'm gonna speed this up, but so I went through, they were still there the next day. I called, I got right through, but I got through to what is 311, and they do not serve the city of Troutdale, as they told me. And so they sent me to Multnomah County Sheriff. It went to the a different department. They had no idea what to do. So I was like, well, let's just leave it. And I politely included Ray in on this information. Again, the next week I went down to the burrito shop, great place. And in the little cubby there was a guy with his dog, and they were kind of hanging out in there camping with all this junk. And so I called once again, got right through to the 311, was informed. So I asked them a couple of questions, found out that that's just for the city of Portland, and it's not going to do anything for Troutdale. So I included Ray on this again, and through it's not really my hard work, Ray's hard work of persuading and pushing whoever the powers may be, they were able to identify the shortcoming. And so now when you call non-emergency and you say there's somebody camping or there's a homeless person, it will direct you to respond to what city you live in, and then it should direct you to Multnomah County Sheriff's Office to get a more timely and accurate response.
Wow.
To that. So
yes, thank you, Councilor Wynn. They found there was a error in their phone tree, and that they assumed everybody lived in Portland. city limits. And so they just say, Portland doesn't care. Well, now they ask, what city are you in? And they will dispatch them.
And as part of this, I just want to encourage, and there's not that many people here, but anybody, if you do see this, please call and let them know. I think this does a great service to keep our city clean. Also, it just goes to show that our city cares about our surroundings. I don't want to say other cities don't care, but and keeps it a clean, livable place, and that we don't tolerate certain activities. So I also want to appreciate Ray for bearing with me and helping get this problem solved. So
yeah,
that's all.
Thank you for all your hard work and not anything Ray did.
We also have the HOPE team.
Yeah.
With MCSO that can go out and offer resources.
They are not available on the weekend, though. I found out.
No, Monday through Friday,
Yeah.
8 to 5, I think.
So when I called Saturday, they're like, oh, well, we'll get that to them. And I was like, okay, great. When will they come? And they're like, oh, sometime next week. And I'm like, this person's going to be gone by then. So yeah.
Good to know. Thanks.
Okay. Counselor White.
Yeah, I just wanted to state that, I think I respect Allison's decision tonight, but I think just declaring a potential conflict of interest would have been sufficient, and abstaining from votes are very rare on council, has been my experience. And with that, I just want to wish everyone and their pets a happy Thanksgiving.
Counselor Wittrin.
Nothing, just happy holidays, happy Thanksgiving, appreciate everybody, and good conversation tonight, so thank you, everybody.
Yeah, Counselor Glantz.
Yeah, well, are we supposed to also say happy Friendsgiving? Isn't that the new holiday this weekend? On our windy wonderland, I have to say that's slow, at the general store all day on Saturday will be the Main Streets on Halsey consultant group taking opinions on what that plan should be. And as of earlier this week, Troutdale residents only accounted for 25% of respondents. So it'd be nice if everybody could get in there and help boost that up.
All right. Counselor Ritma.
As president of the Troutdale Historical Society Board, I just want to tell everyone about this year's Christmas at the Barn. It's not at the Harlow House. The first year we've done it, Harlow House was getting too many people, and it's an old house and takes a beating. So we're doing it at the Barn, which is next to the Harlow House, on December 2nd, Saturday, noon to 3. Santa and Mrs. Claus will be there. There's gifts for the kids and a book signing by Helen Wand about her. She has a wonderful book, several books about East County. And so all are invited. Christmas at the Barn. Other than that, happy Thanksgiving to all.
Counselor Caswell.
Nothing for me.
I will just say happy Thanksgiving, and I hope you have a wonderful time with your friends and family and whoever else you care about, and enjoy it. And thank you for tonight's discussion.
Make a motion to adjourn.
Second.
All in favor signify by saying aye.
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 All opposed? All right, everybody, we are done. Thank you very much. Have a good evening.
Okay.